How's it going, guys? So if you guys are here watching this video, that means you guys want to learn how to code as fast as possible in 2019. So I'm going to show you guys the fundamental of programming and these tools. I'm going to call them tools that make up every single app, every single program out there. So first thing, please guys, please stop jumping around programming languages when you're starting off. This is a mistake that a whole bunch of people make, and it's, they start off with like C++ or Java or Python, and they learn halfway through it and they just start jumping around to different languages. I don't recommend doing that. I recommend sticking to one, right? So if you learn how to make iOS apps, learn Swift. If you want to learn Android apps, learn Java. So if you want to learn how to make websites, learn HTML and like JavaScript and PHP, stuff like that. So pick what you want to learn and pick one of those languages. Pick one. The next thing I recommend is learning everything about the language and learning these so-called tools. And what I mean by tools is variables, right? So you have variables as your first tool. Variable is when you do math where you have like find x or find the value of x. Well, that x is a variable, right? That holds some kind of value. That's exactly what a variable is in programming. So if I have a variable called name and it's equal to Mackenzie, so that means I can use the name variable to replace Mackenzie all over my program. The next tool is if statements. If statements are super easy. You want to kind of read your code like you're reading an essay. So if it says like if number is greater than 10, then you kind of do whatever's in there. And if it says, if number's less than 10, then it does something else. It's just kind of like reading an essay, and you have like some sort of condition inside of it. So this is where you're checking something, right? If the user's logged in, if the payment was not successful, do this, right? So that's where you're checking something. You're doing some kind of condition. Another one is arrays. Now arrays, I use it in every single project. All an array is some sort of list, some sort of container. You call it a box. Whatever you want to call it. It's just a list of objects, and that's all it is. So a perfect example of an array is Instagram feed, right? So your Instagram feed is a whole bunch of posts, and believe it or not, all those posts are in an array, and then they're just being populated onto the table. I'm going to give you guys a better example when we go look at the code. But before we do that, we have two more fundamental things to go over. The next fundamental thing is something called loops. Now a loop is when you want to iterate through something, right, a certain number of times, right, or until something equals false, right? So for example, a for loop does it for n amount of times, right? I can do from 0 to 100, do this, right? So maybe go through an array, right? Maybe display all the students' names or display all the posts that I have on that array. Maybe add all the numbers from 0 to 10 and maybe just add all the even ones or something, right? It's something when you want to go over and over. We're going to go over all these things on the code so it makes more sense. But I definitely recommend learning all these things before moving on to a different language. The reason why I say that is because it's gonna make your life easier when you want to learn a different language, right? Because you already know all these tools that make up almost every programming language. So as long as you know these things, picking up Swift or picking up Java, it's going to be super easy for you. All you have to do is just write it different because the syntax is different. So focus on learning these things, and trust me, guys, it's going to be 10 times easier for you in the future to learn a different language. Now you're probably asking yourself, Mac, why would I want to learn a different language when I already became a pro on something, right? You're going to want to move on from, like, let's say you do mobile development, right? Maybe in the future you want to do web development or software engineering development, right? So there's so many different things you can do with code. And like me personally, I started as a web developer, but now I'm a mobile developer, but I also like coding Arduinos, right? So you could do so much of code, right? But all these things have these fundamental tools that I'm mentioning. So I'm gonna stop talking. We're gonna head to the computer. We're gonna go over this code so you guys can kind of, understand all the things I was talking about. So, all right, guys. So we're back on the computer, and we're gonna be going over all the tools that I mentioned. Right. So here is a variable. I'm using JavaScript, but like I said, the programming language doesn't really matter when you're learning how to code. You just want to learn these fundamentals. So if you want to start with JavaScript, go right ahead. You want to start with Swift, go right ahead. But let's just learn the how to use variables and what a variable is. So I created a variable called number1 and I made it equal to 5. Created a second variable called number2 and I also made it equal to 10. So I have two variables, number1 and number2. And I created another variable called sum. And all I did was number1 plus number2. So if I actually want to display, what the sum is, which I'm going to do right now, you're probably explaining, okay, Mac, you're writing console log. I have no clue what that is. All that is how do you display something on the terminal? This is written different, right, in different languages, but all I'm doing is printing something out so I can kind of test my code. So I want to print out what the sum is, right? So all I'm going to write is print out. So think of this as like display, right? Display whatever I put inside of it, which is this variable called sum. And I'm going to run this. And it says 15, and then it says all this other stuff right here. This is the other code that we're going to go over, but as you can see, it says 15 because that is the sum of number1 plus number2. So just a quick overview of what a variable is. It just holds some kind of value. It doesn't have to be a number. I can hold my name and display it. So a name, you put it inside quotations, and I will just put Mackenzie. That's my name. And I'm actually going to give you guys another example. So let's do var first equals Mackenzie, and var second equal I can't even type my last name. All right, so I have my first name, my last name. I'm gonna make a variable now to hold both of, first plus second. There we go, and I'm gonna display this now. And I go to run this, and it says Mackenzie Alvarez. So it's just an example. It's just how to use variables. Pretty simple stuff, but you use this all over your app, right? Another example how you would use this on your app is a variable to hold your post, all your to-dos in your list. You could use it everywhere, basically. The next thing we're going to go over is what an if statement is. An if statement is something where you have a condition, you're checking something, you're checking if it's true or if it's false or whatever. And here, this percent symbol, what it means is the remainder, right? So if I do sum, right, which sum is, you guys tell me what sum is. What do you guys think sum is? Sum is 15, right? So all we're doing is 2 divided by 15, and whatever the remainder is, right? So think of this as a remainder. The remainder is 1, right? Is it equal to 0? And it's false, right? It's not equal to 0. So it's not going to run this because this is not true, correct? I'm going to give you guys a better example, another example. So I'm going to get rid of this if statement. And let's say if first name equals Mackenzie, then console log, which we're going to display something. So welcome back, Mac. Else, we'll just display something else like login or something, right? We're just making up stuff so you guys can kind of get the hang of what an if statement is. So I'm going to run this, and it says welcome back, Mac. So all I'm doing, I'm checking what's the value of first, right? And first equals Mackenzie, and I'm saying equals. So check the difference between equal and 2 equal signs. So here I'm actually saying make this equal to this, and here I'm comparing it. So two equal signs is comparing. That can be different between programming language, but that's just a fundamental thing, right? So as long as you learn this in one language, it's a quick, easy Google search in a different language. So here it is. That's an if statement. And here is what an array is. So remember how I said it's a list? So here's a list of numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? If I wanted these, like I said, this is a list of like names, right? Let's say I'll make another one called names. And I'm gonna put a whole bunch of names, right? So let's say I put Mackenzie, Isabel, and like Keyshawn or something, right? So I have 3 names. And this is just a list like I mentioned. And let's say I want to get the first person, right? Remember I mentioned that when it comes to programming, most languages, they start their arrays at 0. So if I would do names, and I kind of go inside of the list, right? I'm opening the box, and I would just pick 0, which is the first item. And if I display 0, as you guys can see right here, it says Mackenzie. I'm gonna remove all the other ones, so I'm just gonna put a comment. A comment, all it is your code. When you run this, it's not gonna read this. It's kind of like where you can leave notes. So I'm gonna leave a comment, and all it's gonna display is this. We'll also stop displaying this, and let's run this again. Sweet. So it says Mackenzie. The reason it says Mackenzie is because it's going inside the list, right? And it's picking item 0. So if I wanted to get Keyshawn, what number would I put here? Well, I'll put 2. Now you're probably asking, Mac, 1, 2, 3. Why didn't you put 3? Well, the reason is we start at 0, guys. So 0, 1, 2. So if I run this, it should display Keyshawn. So as you can see, this is how you would use an array. You can use this everywhere. So let's say this is your first Instagram post, second, third, right? You could do this with numbers as well, right? You could do this with any kind of object. It's just a list, right? So that's all an array is a list. Here's an example of a loop. And I know this looks super complicated, right? It's really not. All we're doing is creating a variable called I, and we're starting it at 0. Then we're comparing I to numbers, right? So numbers dot length. What's the length of numbers? Now this, you actually read it like if it was English. So you do 1, 2, 3, 4. So we say replace this with 4, right? So here's a better example. This is currently 0 greater than 4, right? This is true, correct? 0 is less than 4, correct? So this is going to, as long as this is true, this inside is going to run. And after this runs one time, it goes and does this, which is I++, which means I then equals 1, and this runs again. Then I equals 2, this runs again. I equals 3, this runs again. I equals 4, and this does not run again because 4 is not greater than 4. If I had an equal sign, then it would. But I know it's a little confusing. If you guys want another video explaining a little bit more in depth about for loops and just loops in general, just comment down below. I'm just gonna try to do a quick overview of how it is to program. So here I created a quick for loop to add all the numbers in my numbers array. Right, so I'm doing from numbers.length, which is 4. So go to 0 through 4, right? That's all my indexes, not including 4. So it's really just going to do 0 to 3. And I'm saying here, get the number. So get the current number, right? Numbers.I, and I equals 0, then I equals 1, then I equals 2, then I equals 3. And do total plus equals. What plus equals is the same thing as saying total equals total plus element. So it's just oops, sorry about that, like this. Plus equal is just saying, hey, add the current value, right? Don't just like overwrite it. Just add the current value plus whatever you're adding, right? So total equals total, right? So say total 0 right now. So then it does 0 plus 1, and that means total equals 1. So then 1 plus 2, that means total equals 3, and so on and so on. So we're going to delete this. And that's what this does. So if we want to display the total of all the numbers, what we do, guys, we just do console.log and display total. And we have 10, right? We add all the numbers, we get 10. Sweet. So the last thing I mentioned, guys, was something called function, right? And I mentioned, hey, let's not repeat our code. And that's exactly what this is. So we made a function, right, where we put some kind of code in it. We put n plus. So here's where we're passing like values that we're going to use. That we're going to use inside our function. We pass it in here, right? These are called parameters. So we're saying, hey, to use this function, it needs n1 and n2. And then all we're doing is we just add them together and we give them back to the user. So here, if I uncomment this, we say add 5 and 10, right? So we're sending these values, 5 and 10, to this function. And then we're adding them and we're sending it back to this. So then all this is going to do is display 15. So let's save the file and then run it, and we get 15. So as you can see, we're adding numbers a lot here, and all we could do is just create a function and just use this, honestly. For example, let's say I have this add function now, right? I can replace this, honestly, to an add function. And the way I would do that is, so the total was 10, guys. Let's remember that. So we do total equals add. And what are the two numbers we're adding? We're adding total and we're adding element. Okay, so I'm going to comment that out. And let's see if we still get 10. Great, we still do get 10. So really all I'm doing is sending total and sending element into this function I made called add. But this whole thing, this function can be, 100 lines of code that I'm just repeating over and over in my program. So rather than repeating it, I create a function. So I hope you guys got the basic understanding. We just learned everything on what it takes to make a program and how to learn how to code very, very fast just by learning those fundamental things. If you guys want to learn more, don't forget to subscribe. Like this video, comment below which language you guys are starting off with. If you guys want to watch me build something using those things, just let me know and I'll try to help you guys as much as possible. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace out.